Powell, City Hall Bureau Chief with City and State. Joining me on today's City and State TV is Tony Marx. He's the president of the New York Public Library. Thank you for joining us today, Tony.
It's great to be here, Nick.
So, Tony, for those of our viewers who aren't really aware of how well the library has been performing, you've seen record levels of attendance and circulation in recent years. And I'm curious, just before we get into some of the discussions on the budget, what do you attribute that to, and why have the libraries been performing so well recently?
So the New York Public Libraries altogether, the 5 boroughs, we get about 40 million physical visits a year, which is more than all the museums and all the professional sporting teams in town combined. It's amazing. It's never been higher. Circulation through the roof. So I think probably 2 reasons. One is the economy, especially after 2008. People can't afford books, people can't afford computers, people can't afford quiet space, they can't afford air conditioning, right? So a lot of that. The bottom third of New York, as far as we can tell, really rely on us. They have no alternative in terms of books and computers and quiet space. Right. And then I think the internet age, surprisingly enough, has helped us in the sense that even if you could work at home alone, we're human beings. We want to be together, right? We want to be in inspiring spaces. And also nice if you can find other people to talk to and use great librarians and great collections. But even just the space is, the Rosemain Reading Room, a lot of those people could be working, I bet, at home, but it's an amazing space, so they want to be there. I think the other thing to say about the library is it's the civic space of New York for everyone. And, that means everyone from the immigrant or the school kid or the homeless folks to Pulitzer Prize winners and Nobel laureates and professional scholars and researchers or freelancers. And I actually think New Yorkers love that specialness of this town, that reach of difference that brings us together. And the library is the one place to do it. I think actually that's part of the appeal as well.
Absolutely. So those sounding the alarm that the digital age would bring the death of the libraries, a little bit too soon for that.
Absolutely not. So my son was amongst those when I took this job. And he's wrong and everyone else is wrong. Physical book circulation still our mainstay, through the roof. Electronic circulation now rising rapidly, but people want to do both, and people rely on the library to be able to do both. And it's not just the collections that circulate, it's the rare material, it's the unique material, it's the space, it's also the amazing staff, right? In this day and age when so much information flows, you need help to navigate it. You need to figure out what's the good stuff and what's the crap. Sure. Librarians have been doing that for a very long time, right? I mean, right. So none of that's going away.
Good to hear. So let's talk about the budget a little bit. The libraries received a nice boost in this year's budget from Mayor de Blasio and the City Council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and my colleagues on the City Council.
So let's talk about how much more money the system has to work with now, and what you're going to be able to do with some of that additional funding. Right. You have some exciting programs going on now. So what are we?
So we'd seen cuts for I think 7 consecutive years, 6 or 7 consecutive years. We were down in terms of real spending close to 20%. We didn't close any branches. In fact, we have more branches than ever. We didn't reduce our hours. But there's a limit to how far you can go, and we were feeling those constraints, and certainly our great colleagues and staff and our users were feeling that. We got a baseline at the end of the Bloomberg administration. That meant we didn't have to worry about fighting to just stay where we were. And then in this first administration budget with the current administration and City Hall and the City Council, we got a $10 million increase across the 3 systems. Now that's great, right? First increase. It meant the New York Public, we could hire children's librarians that we hadn't been hiring for a long time, I think about 20 of those, as well as significantly continuing to increase our educational programs. So instead of 20,000 kids hanging out in our branches after school every day, which has been true for decades and was true for me, we're building towards 20,000 kids in after-school programs. So we can contribute to the academic achievement of the students of New York. Or we're the leading free provider of English language instruction. We've tripled the size of that. We're the leading free provider of basic computer skills training. We've tripled the size of that. We're teaching coding in the South Bronx and Harlem. We're having Coursera meetings for online courses in the libraries. We're teaching teachers how to use Khan Academy. All of this increase helps. We're also raising private money to work together because the library is the quintessential public-private partnership.
Right.
Queens and Brooklyn, where they had, during the cuts, they had reduced their hours. They're using the restoration to bring those hours back. But let's be very clear, Nick. We got a $10 million increase across 3 systems. We were down about $60 million from where we started before the cuts began.
Right.
So not talking about any increases
Right.
and doing more, which we want to do and which New Yorkers need us to do. We still have a ways to go just to get back to where we were. And our hope is, working with the mayor and the city council leadership, is to get to at least that restoration, get to some stability, and be able to massively increase educational programs, after school, pre-K, English language, computer,
Right.
increase our hours. I mean, the New York libraries have less hours than the Detroit libraries do in
Right.
terms of open. That's crazy.
Right. Right.
We're closed. Most of our facilities are closed on Sundays. That's when people are available, right? Want to be able to go borrow a book, go to a program, whatever. So there's more to do. We're prepared to raise more private money. We're raising private money for the branches for the first time in our history so that we can really partner with the city and do this right. You know, New York deserves nothing less. We're the information capital of the world. People want to devour it.
Sure, absolutely. Now you talk about trying to reach that prior level of funding. Is there a good level of dialogue with this administration and I guess the cultural affairs folks at the city council, Jimmy Van Bramer and those guys in terms of just kind of eventually getting to that point? Is there an understanding that more needs to be done even with this boost?
I think that's right. I mean, look, Jimmy and others at the city council have been huge advocates of the library for a very long time. They were in the lead in the fight to get us this $10 million restoration across the 3 systems. They know that we need to do more. We're in constant communication with the folks on the mayor's side as well. Look, I think we will get there. I really do believe that. I think we need to remind ourselves of how important these institutions are in every neighborhood, the only place where we can gather, the only place where people can get the information they need. You can't even apply for a job these days if you can't get on a computer. And for a third of New York, the only place they can afford to be on a computer is for free in the library.
Right.
But I think one of the things that happened is the libraries became sort of like the furniture. We sort of came to take them for granted. I think we're getting over that.
Well, I wanted to touch on that also, but I mean, I'm curious from your perspective because it seems like when the economy starts to take a downturn and the city has to figure out where to trim services and trim money, it seems like the cultural institutions are typically one of the first that go on the chopping block. What about that mindset? What strikes you about that mindset, I guess, in terms of how the government budgets and things like that? Why do you think it's? I mean, I'm just it seems like we have the same conversations. It's libraries, it's firehouses. Why do you think that that's the case?
Well, look, I think obviously we have to. You have to maintain some core services, right? In the darkest days, we have trouble doing police and firehouses and the subway, et cetera. I think, partly we didn't understand that the libraries are actually fundamental to the educational fabric of the city. So they've been cut more than the schools. I'm not in favor of cutting the schools. I want the schools to get more money too, right? And do as great a job as they possibly can. But I think we got misunderstood. We're also, unlike, say, some of the major famous cultural institutions, half of our budget comes from the city, right? And when you, or in the case of Brooklyn and Queens systems, it's like 85%.
Right.
When you cut that budget, for Brooklyn and Queens, there's no place else to go, right? And we have a limit to how far we can go, even with great private donations, for which we're incredibly grateful. I think we are all coming out of an era, a long era, in which we sort of forgot what the public good means and how you have to invest in the public good. Library is sort of foundational to a public good, a civic society that rests on information and education and people being able to read.
Sure. Right.
Pretty fundamental.
Pretty basic
right?
skills. Yeah,
right.
yeah, sure. Absolutely. Tony Marx, the president of the New York Public Library, thanks for joining us today.
Nick, it's great to be here.